Somebody who loves you lied to you, not because they wanted to hurt you, because they believed it themselves. Your parents told you to get a good job and save what you can. Your teachers told you to study hard and the money would follow. Your friends told you not to take risks, because risks are how people lose everything. The government built a system that takes from your paycheck before you even see it and calls that responsible. The books on the shelf at the store told you 10 steps to become a millionaire, and most of those books were written by people who never were one. The podcasts you listen to on the way to work tell you to hustle harder, post more, grind longer, and somehow that will turn into wealth. All of that came from people who love you. None of it was designed to keep you poor, but all of it, together, built a cage. And you have been living inside that cage, decorating it, defending it, calling it home. Piasi. Today we open the door. Emphasis. There are two sets of rules in this world. There is the set the public is taught, and there is the set the few actually practice. The public rules sound responsible. Work hard. Save 10%. Avoid debt. Retire at 65. The ground rules. The rules practiced quietly in small back offices of family businesses in places like Tulsa and Allentown and Spokane are different. They are not secret because someone is hiding them from you. They are secret because almost nobody is willing to live by them. Jim Rohn spent his whole life trying to close that gap between what is taught and what is true. He used to say that formal education will make you a living, but self-education will make you a fortune. Today we are going to walk the second path. Not 7 rules, not 10, 6. Exactly 6. Because 6 is the actual number of load-bearing pillars holding up real wealth. Take one away and the structure leans. Add a 7th and you are just padding the truth to sound smarter than it is. 6 is the number. Memorize it. The spread, the soldier test, the compounding decade, the skill stack, the lifestyle freeze, the quiet network. 6 pillars. Say them with me because by the end of this video they will live in you the way a song lives in your head after one listen. Some of this will hurt. Some of this will contradict what your mother told you, what your favorite teacher told you, what the nightly news told you. If you cannot handle finding out you are wrong about something you believed your whole life, this is the moment to leave. Close the video now. Go back to the rules that feel comfortable. But if you stay, you are agreeing to something. You are agreeing to look at your own life without flinching. This happens in small back offices of family businesses in cities nobody writes songs about. Janitors who quietly became millionaires. Immigrants who could barely speak English when they got off the plane and ended up owning 4 stores by the time they turned 48. Mechanics who fixed cars for 30 years and retired in their 50s with more in the bank than the lawyers who lived 2 streets over. These are not fairy tales. These people are real, and the pattern they followed is more boring than you want it to be. Let's walk through it, pillar by pillar. The first pillar is called the spread. Jim Rohn used to say that the only difference between a wealthy person and a poor person is the gap between what they earn and what they live on. He called this the most honest number in personal finance. Most people stare at their income and think that number is the whole story. It is not even half the story. Let me tell you about a person. I knew a janitor years back who cleaned office buildings downtown after the lights went out and everyone else went home. His name does not matter. What matters is this: every single year, no matter what raise he got, his lifestyle stayed exactly the same. Same apartment, same car, same lunch he packed in the same brown bag. People at the office assumed he was just frugal because he had to be. They were wrong. He was frugal because he understood the spread before anyone gave it that name. Here is the math, because the math is the only honest teacher in this room. If you make $50,000 a year and you spend $48,000 of it, your spread is $2,000. If you invest that $2,000 every year for 30 years at an average return of 8%, you do not end up with $60,000. You end up with roughly $245,000. Notice that. The spread, left alone and given time, does something income by itself can never do. It compounds. A river does not flood a valley by moving fast. It floods the valley by moving constantly, year after year, wearing down whatever stands in its path. Your spread is your river. Stop staring at your paycheck and start staring at your gap. If you are still with me, you just learned something that changes how you will look at your next paycheck. You now know that the number on the check was never the real number. The real number is what's left after you live. Keep that consequence in your chest as we move to the second pillar. The second pillar is called the soldier test. This one is uncomfortable, so brace yourself. Jim Rohn talked often about discipline, the kind that has nothing to do with motivation, because motivation runs out and discipline does not need permission to keep going. The soldier test asks one simple question: If no one was watching you, and no one would ever know, would you still do the hard thing? Let me tell you about a person. There was an immigrant who came to this country with almost no English, who took a job stocking shelves at a grocery store at 4 in the morning because that was the only shift available to him. Nobody supervised that shift closely. The manager slept in, the cameras barely worked, he could have moved slow, he could have cut corners. Instead, every single morning for years, he stocked those shelves like the owner was standing behind him, because he had decided, privately, what kind of person he was going to be when nobody was looking. By the time he was 48 years old, that same man owned 4 of his own stores. Here is the math behind why this matters more than people admit. Discipline compounds the same way money does. If you make 1% more disciplined decisions than the average person, every single day, for 10 years, that is not a 1% difference by the end. Compounded daily, 1% better every day for a year alone produces someone who is roughly 37 times more capable than where they started. The soldier test is not about looking strong in public. It is about staying strong in private. Bamboo spends its first 5 years building roots underground that nobody can see, and only after those roots are set does it shoot 60 feet into the air in a matter of weeks. Your discipline is the root system. Nobody applauds roots. Everybody applauds the height. But the height was never possible without the roots. If you are still with me at this point, you have learned that the wealth you want is downstream of decisions nobody will ever see you make. That changes how you show up tomorrow morning before anyone is watching. Keep that with you as we move into the third pillar. The third pillar is called the compounding decade. This is the pillar most people understand intellectually and ignore practically, which is the most dangerous kind of ignorance there is. Jim Rohn said that we suffer one of 2 things, the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. And the difference is that discipline weighs ounces while regret weighs tons. The compounding decade pillar says this: there is one specific decade in most people's lives where the decisions they make either set them free or lock them into struggle for the next 30 years. For most people, this decade is somewhere between their late 20s and their late 30s. Let me tell you about a person. There was a draftsman, the kind who worked with pencils and rulers before computers took over that whole profession, who decided in his early 30s that this was the decade. He did not wait for a promotion. He did not wait for a raise. He started putting away money in that decade with a discipline that looked almost obsessive to the people around him. Here is the math, because the math is the only honest teacher in this room. If a person invests $10,000 a year starting at age 30 and stops entirely at age 40, never adding another dollar, and that money grows at 8% until age 65, they will end up with more money than a person who waits until 40 to start and invests the same $10,000 every single year all the way until they are 65. Read that again. The person who invested for only 10 years, but invested in the right decade, beat the person who invested for 25 years, but started late. That is not motivational language. That is arithmetic. The seed planted in the right season of soil grows into a forest. The same seed planted 10 years later, in soil that is already hardened, struggles just to survive. Your compounding decade is the season. Do not waste it waiting for permission. If you are still with me 12 minutes into this, you now understand that timing inside your own life matters more than most financial advice admits. You cannot get this decade back once it passes. That consequence should sit heavy on you right now. Let's keep moving. The fourth pillar is called the skill stack. Jim Rohn was famous for saying that you should work harder on yourself than you do on your job, because what you become directly affects what you get. Most people think wealth comes from one big skill, one lucky break, one perfect talent. It does not. It comes from stacking ordinary skills on top of each other until the combination becomes rare. Let me tell you about a person. There was a mechanic, the kind who learned to fix engines by watching his father do it in a garage with a dirt floor, who never stopped at just fixing cars. He learned how to read a balance sheet so he could understand his own shop's numbers. He learned how to negotiate with suppliers, not because anyone taught him formally, but because he forced himself to sit through every uncomfortable negotiation instead of avoiding it. He learned how to hire and manage people, which most mechanics never bother learning because they think their value is only in their hands. By the time he hit his 50s, he was not just a mechanic anymore. He was a mechanic who understood money, who understood people, and who understood operations, all stacked on top of each other. And that stack is what let him retire decades before the people who only ever had one skill. Here is the math behind why stacking beats specializing for most people. If you are in the top 25% at one single skill, you are competing against roughly 1 in 4 people. But if you become merely above average, say top 50%, at 4 different skills that complement each other, The odds of someone else matching that exact combination drop to roughly 1 in 16. Stack a third skill, and you are down to 1 in roughly 32. You do not need to be a genius at one thing. You need to be capable at several things that nobody else bothered combining. A river by itself carves a canyon slowly. A river joined by 3 smaller streams carves that same canyon in a fraction of the time. Your skills are the streams. Stop trying to be the strongest single stream and start building the convergence. If you are still with me at 18 minutes, you just learned that the rare version of you is built from ordinary pieces stacked in an order nobody else thought to combine. That is a different kind of pressure than the pressure to be a genius. It is more achievable and it is more honest. The 5th pillar is called the lifestyle freeze. This one is the most painful pillar because it requires you to say no to things you have already convinced yourself you deserve. Jim Rohn talked about this constantly without ever using this exact phrase. He said that the same wind blows on us all, but it is the set of the sail, not the direction of the wind, that determines where we go. The lifestyle freeze means this: when your income goes up, your spending does not automatically have to go up with it. Most people get a raise, and within months their car payment, their rent, their subscriptions, and their habits have all quietly expanded to swallow the new income whole, leaving their spread exactly where it was before, or worse. Let me tell you about a person. Go back to that anonymous saver, the one who cleaned office buildings downtown. Over the years, his pay did increase. Cost of living adjustments came. A few promotions to senior custodian came with small raises attached, and every single time his lifestyle stayed completely frozen at the level he had set years earlier. His apartment did not get bigger, his car did not get newer. He froze his lifestyle on purpose while everyone around him let theirs creep upward an inch at a time until that creeping inch became a mile. Here is the math, because the math is the only honest teacher in this room. If your income grows by 3% a year for 30 years, but your lifestyle spending stays completely frozen at its original level, your spread does not just grow by 3% a year. It grows exponentially as a percentage of your income, because the gap between a rising number and a frozen number widens faster every single year that passes. A dam does not stop a river. It redirects the same water into something useful instead of letting it flood wherever it wants to go. Your lifestyle freeze is the dam. The income still flows. You are simply choosing where it goes instead of letting it flood your spending automatically. If you are still with me, you have now learned the most uncomfortable consequence in this entire video. The next raise you get, the next bonus, the next windfall, is a test, not a reward. What you do with it in that moment will tell you which version of your future you are actually building. The 6th and final pillar is called the quiet network. This pillar surprises people because it sounds social, and most of the people listening to a video like this consider themselves private, even introverted. But the quiet network has nothing to do with parties or business cards. Jim Rohn said you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, and very few people ever audit that list honestly. Let me tell you about a person. There was a barber. The kind who cuts hair in the same chair for 30 years and knows 3 generations of the same family by name, who quietly built relationships with a small group of other tradespeople in his town. A plumber, an electrician, a small accountant who did taxes out of a spare bedroom. None of them were rich when they met. None of them had connections to anything glamorous. But they met for coffee every few weeks, and they held each other accountable, and they shared what was working in their small businesses, and they warned each other away from mistakes before those mistakes got made. That quiet, boring, unglamorous network is what let the barber retire in his 50s with more saved than people who had networked at expensive conferences for decades. Here's the math, because the math is the only honest teacher in this room. If you surround yourself with 5 people whose average financial discipline is even 10% higher than your current discipline, behavioral research consistently shows your own discipline drifts upward to match the group over a period of roughly 18 to 24 months. You do not even have to try. The group pulls you. Bees do not make honey by working alone. They make honey because the entire hive moves in the same direction, reinforcing the same behavior day after day, until the result is something no single bee could have produced by itself. Your quiet network is your hive. Audit it. Most people never do, because it requires admitting that some relationships, even loving ones, are quietly pulling them in the wrong direction. That completes the 6 pillars. The spread, the soldier test, the compounding decade, the skill stack, the lifestyle freeze, the quiet network. Here is the great paradox sitting underneath everything you just heard. Every single one of these 6 pillars is simple enough to write on a single index card. A child could read that card and understand every word of it. And yet, fewer than 1 in 50 people who hear this will actually go and live differently tomorrow morning because of it. Not because the information was hidden, not because it was complicated, but because doing simple things consistently for years without applause is the hardest thing a human being can choose to do. Jim Rohn spent his life saying that what is easy to do is also easy not to do, and that single sentence explains almost everything about why some people end up wealthy and most people, despite knowing better, do not. So here's what I'm asking you to do right now before you close this video and let your normal life swallow what you just heard. Get a piece of paper, an actual piece of paper, not a note on your phone. Get a pen, write down 3 things, not 6, not 10, 3 concrete commitments tied to the pillars you just learned. Something specific about your spread. Something specific about a discipline you will hold even when nobody is watching. Something specific about who is in your quiet network and whether they need to change. Then go stand in front of a mirror and read those 3 lines out loud to yourself and sign your name underneath them and date it today. This is your 30-day contract. Not a 30-day challenge, not a 30-day experiment you can quietly abandon when it gets uncomfortable. A contract with yourself for 30 days. 98 of you watching this right now will agree with everything I just said. You will nod along, you will feel something shift in your chest, and you will go back to exactly the life you were living yesterday. 2 of you will actually change. I do not know which one of you are yet. Neither do you, honestly. Not until 30 days from now when you look at that signed piece of paper again and ask yourself whether you kept your word to the only person whose opinion of you will matter when you are old. The room you are sitting in right now, wherever it is, contains everything you need to begin. You do not need a new job. You do not need a windfall. You do not need permission from anyone who loves you, even though some of what they taught you was wrong. You need the paper, the pen, the mirror, and 30 days. That is the entire blueprint. Everything else was commentary. If this found you at the right moment, the next video walks through what happens after the 30 days end when the contract either gets renewed or gets quietly thrown away, and why that second decision matters even more than the first one. A few honest notes before you go and use this. The stories above are illustrative composites in the classic motivational speaker tradition, not documented real individuals, and I'd present them that way rather than implying verified case studies. The compounding math is directionally accurate but rounded for narration, worth double-checking exact figures if you want precision in the final cut. And the 98 versus 2 line and similar pressure tactics are powerful hooks, but they're manipulation devices. False urgency, in-group out-group framing, your call. Whether that fits the tone you want your channel known for long-term. Happy to draft the OUT1 hook, CTAs, description, tags, and thumbnail text next if you want the full package.